The libido doctor is in.
Hello and welcome to libidodoc, a place where we talk about human sexuality with a focus on married women. I'm Dr. Suzanne, and today I would like to talk about 4 different types of marriages. 2 that are humanly orchestrated, one with unequal partners and another one with equal partners, and 2 that are spiritually orchestrated, one from the kingdom of darkness and one from the kingdom of light. In the first category of human matchmaker, there is a need that has to be filled, and the man is going to pick a partner that's not necessarily equal to him, equal in education, equal in potential for income, equal in social status. There is some sort of inequality. And usually the wife is very dependent on the man, and she doesn't have much to say in the house and in the decisions of the household or in the marriage even. Especially in African tribes, it doesn't happen a lot anymore, where you can see that in certain villages, parents want the men to marry the girls from that particular area. In this type of marriages, the wife is not always that happy because there is some sort of obligation to do whatever she has to do, So if we talk about libido or sexual attraction, they might learn to know each other, to please each other, and sometimes it doesn't happen because the man doesn't really take time to know his wife. The second category is human matchmaker, where both partners are equal. They are either equal in wealth, equal in education, equal in social status, or equal in family background. So I would say that 60 to 70% of marriages are like that. And you see this emergence of power couples because the man specifically chooses a woman that will be an asset to his assignment and his destiny. When he looks at the woman, he's looking at certain traits that will enhance his life. But in this case, the lady also has a certain level, so she's not necessarily going to be oppressed in the marriage. But this type of marriage is like, the builder type, where you bring kind of equal participation, either in knowledge or skills or money. With time, the sexual desire is going to decrease, and we will have more instances of adultery. But because of all the entanglement of the assets and all that, those couples don't split. Okay, the second category of marriages are the spiritual marriages, like we said. The first one I would like to talk about is the one that's orchestrated from the demonic kingdom. And there are different categories, but there is always a spirit entity involved in the situation. It could be a woman that's sent from the kingdom of darkness to destroy a man of God. That's one category. The other category could be, let's say, a man that is in love with a girl, and that girl does not love him back. So he feels the need to prepare a magical potion or a charm to catch the girl. So now the third category could be parents who have a covenant and who absolutely want their children to marry someone. So the parents will go to a witch doctor and make all these covenant and make all these binding and make all these potions and force the children to get together without their knowledge. Of marriages usually don't last for life. They don't. Either the charm's timeline gets to the end, and then all of a sudden you get your eyes open and you begin to hate the person to the point of just parting and divorcing. And in the Bible, what example do we have? In the Bible, we actually have the example of Samson. Remember Samson and Delilah? And we can see that in the book of Judges, in the chapters 14 and 15. Now, Samson was a child sent on earth by God to do great things. But he was so rebellious that he didn't even want to listen to his parents. And he was so attracted to Philistines, women, that when he actually got married the first time, during the week of the marriage celebration, the Philistines were already pressuring that woman to give them the secret of Samson, otherwise they were going to burn her. So Samson didn't even learn his lesson, because when he went to Delilah, he still went to the camp of the enemy. Those ladies were demonically orchestrated agents to destroy a man of God. But he ignored the red flags. He ignored his parents' wisdom. He ignored his upbringing. He ignored his origin. They were unequally yoked. They had nothing in common, but he was so attracted to them. And remember, they had a god, I think it was Dagon, who was acting behind the scenes spiritually to trap Samson. And then in the end, Samson lost. He lost his eyes, and as a final show of his strength, he destroyed the palace with everybody in there, including him. So at the end, it was a destruction, which is not good. Okay? So now, the fourth category of marriages I would like to talk about is the spiritual matchmaker from the divine, from God. All right, so how does that happen? This is the most precious one, because when God arranges something, there's always a kingdom assignment behind it. So in order to understand this, I believe we need to go back to Genesis. Okay, so when we go to Genesis 1, I use my Bible. So I give you the verses. So it's Genesis 1, 26 and 27. And then I also recorded 31. But in those passages, God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion." Okay, you can read that part. Then on the verse 27, it says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female. He created them." And then we see in verse 31, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day." When we read the first chapter of Genesis, we understand that God created everything in 6 days. And he created male and female in his image on the sixth day. And then on the seventh day, when you go to Genesis chapter 2, God rested. If God created us in his image and he stopped on the sixth day, he stopped creation on the sixth day, and the seventh day he rested, it means there was a gap between that image of male and female God created and the actual body, the actual being God created after the seventh day. Okay, so if we go to Genesis 2, verse 7, it says here, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostril the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So it tells me that in Genesis 1, verse 26, when God said, let us make a man in our image, he created a soul. But that soul didn't have life yet. I mean, all these spiritual explanation has a scientific explanation to the way a human body lives, right? Because through the nostril, you breathe in oxygen, O2, goes into your lungs, gets an exchange with the CO2, and you exhale it. And then you have also in your blood vessel, you have the arteries, you have the veins. The veins have more of the CO2 and the blood is more bluish. And the arteries have more of the O2 and the blood is more reddish. And in between, you have the lungs. That's actually the factory for the gas exchange between the oxygen and the CO2 that's exhaled. Okay, so breathing that breath in the nostril that gives life to the soul is actually the spirit of life, because when a person is declared dead, is because they don't have the life, they don't breathe anymore. Sometimes we can prolong the life of people by using oxygen, a respirator, and mimicking the movements of the lungs, but a person is not declared dead until, you know, they don't have that exchange of gas, okay, oxygen and CO2. So that's the living soul, breathing through the nostril. But we also learned that God made the body with the dust, okay, the dust, and breath, you know, the breath gave the living soul. So the soul was already created. If the soul was already created, it means that on the sixth day, God created all souls, male and female. And he just had to make the actual physical part. And by making the physical part, he made the woman to carry a womb, because now she was going to become the factory to reproduce human beings and to populate the earth. And we know that God speak, the end from the beginning. That's why in Genesis 1:27 he said, no, it's not 1:27. It's in actually chapter 2. It's 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. This is the physical. God was already speaking into the future, because Adam and Eve didn't really have a mother and a father who wanted to have a dowry to get them married. What is a soul, to start with? A soul is the combination of your emotions, your mind, and your will. If we were made in the image of God, and God is a soul, it means that God has emotions. Is that true? Oh yes. The main emotion of God is love. Remember John 3:16? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Okay? So that emotion of love is what characterizes God. And it's love like fire. It's love like instinct. It's love like no one can explain it. Now we also know that God can have other emotions, especially anger. But we also know that God is very slow to anger. meaning that his first choice is love. Okay, so now compared to the human being, do we have emotions? Oh yes. Is love part of it? Oh yes. Are there other emotions? Of course, yes. But the human being, with all those emotions, usually we focus on, when we love, is because something is attracting us. Okay, so we have the same emotions as God. Now, what about the mind? Does God have a mind? Of course. God in Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the thoughts I have towards you." The mind is the place where we make decisions. We have a thought pattern. So yes, God has a mind, human beings have a mind. Now, what about the will? Remember in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus Christ said that we must bring the will of the Father to come to pass on earth as it is in heaven. So God has a will. Human beings also, we have wills. The man who is going to recognize is heaven's wife, or the wife that is sent to him by God, or the divinely orchestrated union, is first going to respond by his emotions. Okay? And why do I say that? If you go back to Genesis 2:23, after God had Adam in a deep sleep, and he took some of his body parts to make Eve, and then God presented Eve to Adam, the first thing he said is that let me read that. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." So he had a recognition system, because that was the one that was taken from him. Therefore, it tells me that every man should be able to recognize his wife. Period. And how do you recognize her? Because she's not going to run after you. She's just going to float in front of you. She's just going to be around. And if you have eyes to see, you will recognize her. You will know that this one is the one for me. How? Your emotions. That love, the same love God has, you will be so overwhelmed with the feeling of love for that person that is going to be surreal, right? So first you see, right? That's why some people say that men are visual, because they have to see first to recognize. And right after they see, something happens in their emotions. Because when God made your soul, He planted in your soul a uniqueness. You will be attracted to that wife because of certain things. You have to agree with me that there are all kinds of shape, height, size of women. But every man is attracted to a prototype. A man that likes, round glass shape might not like a different type, and the one that like a different type might not like this particular type. So that's the first indication. You have a type that you like. You are attracted by something. So when you see it, you know it. That's the first thing, right? Those emotions are so overwhelming that you want that woman. And that's why God said, you will leave your mother and your father and become one flesh with her. Okay. A lot of people say becoming one flesh is when you have intercourse. But I would like to argue that the one flesh that is happening is the fusion of your souls. Because you complement each other, because that woman, if you don't find her, you will not fulfill your destiny. She carries inside of her your DNA that matches your divine assignment. And if you don't find her, there are certain things you will never achieve in life. Okay? That's how I see it. After much prayer, much reading, much inquiry into the Lord, that's how I see it. So the idea that the souls are interdependent, created together at the same time, but they come in different bodies, male and female, and when they see each other and they find each other, they recognize each other. Not only by the visual, because in the same way men have visual things that attract them in women, women also have the same thing for men. Okay, we say men are visual, women are also visual, but they look at different things. Okay, so then is the visual recognition, is the emotional recognition, and is this type of, your mind is the third criteria is the mind recognition. Your thoughts become so so heightened. Some people call that limerence, some people call that mesmerization, some people call that, actually falling in love and being in love. But your thought pattern completely changes. You get into this state of euphoria, where you see life with different glasses. Everything's beautiful, everything is amazing. And then the other thing that happens is this intense sexual attraction. Okay, sexual attraction without oppression. You don't try to force the other person to be intimate, but you have this attraction that you're not able to understand, and you don't have that with everyone. Sometimes you only have that with one person in your entire life, if it's the right person. I'm not talking about lust. I'm talking about something much deeper. Okay, so we have that. And then all of a sudden the will also intervenes, and you find yourself thinking about a future with that person. You begin to plan in your head, you begin to have goals, and that's when the commitment begins, and you see yourself having a child because that's the ultimate design of God, that desire to have a legacy, to have a child together, to love each other, to come together, to fulfill a divine mission. That's how you recognize your kingdom spouse. That's how you recognize the spiritually, divinely orchestrated marriages. Okay? Most of the time, this kind of love is unconditional, meaning that you cut a lot of slacks. You only see the good in the person, and you begin to see how you can impact the person, how you can make their life better. Because at the end of the day, you are the other half. They need to do certain things in their life. If you don't appear, if you don't intervene, if you don't show up in their lives as the wife, they will never achieve certain things. They will never, right? And most of the time, you carry in your womb. Your womb is the right soil for that one child that will make a huge difference in the kingdom of God. So what are the examples in the Bible? I've noticed so many, but I'm just going to talk about a few of them. The first one is Ruth and Boaz. Remember that Ruth was not even from that area, right? She was Naomi's daughter-in-law. Naomi and her husband moved to that area. I believe it was the Moab country. Had two sons. Their sons married those women. One of them was Ruth. And when Naomi lost her husband and her 2 children, she decided to go back to her village. And Ruth said, I'm coming with you. Your God will be my God. So therefore, Ruth identified and took the spiritual covering of Naomi. So when she gets there, she's a widow. She has accepted the fate of Naomi, and Boaz sees her, right? She's just floating around his field, gleaning, getting some of, whatever she needed to eat and feed her mother-in-law. And then you see, is the man who pursues. He falls in love with her, and he decides to make her his wife, regardless of the obstacle. Okay, that's usually what happens, because you are so overwhelmed with that love, you cannot contain yourself. Okay, and out of that union, they had Obed, who was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David, the first king of Israel. We also have the case of David and Bathsheba. So now people say that maybe Bathsheba seduced David, maybe David didn't act properly, maybe this and that. But you have to understand that David and Bathsheba were twin souls, were soulmates. He was so overwhelmed by love for her that he didn't care that she was married. And every time they had intercourse, they had a child. And out of that union, remember who came? Solomon. Solomon was the wisest, wealthiest, most powerful king of his time, and even of our time. Okay? So, sometimes we have to go beyond what we see. Yes, Bathsheba was married. Yes, David killed Uriah. He wasn't supposed to, because just the fact that he was a king, he could get any wife he wanted. And then the fact that Bathsheba committed adultery, her husband had the right to, ask a divorce. Now, you also have to ask yourself, you have a beautiful wife like Bathsheba, and the king gives you the opportunity to come in town, and you don't want to touch her. You don't want to be sexually active with her. What does that mean? It means that Uriah didn't even love Bathsheba the way she was meant to be loved. Okay, so different opinions, but that's mine. Other examples that I noticed were Jacob and Rachel. Jacob worked 14 years to be married to Rachel. When he first moved to Laban and he saw her, he fell in love and he couldn't stop loving her. And remember who came out of that union? Joseph. Joseph was raised to save many during a time of famine. Okay, so that was a divinely orchestrated union. We also have Abraham and Sarah giving birth to Isaac. Even though Abraham gave birth to other children, the divine marriage, the divine wife that was supposed to bring the legacy seed was Sarah. Okay, so we have to understand that, yes, there are different kinds of marriages, but the only kind that matters is the one that God has put together. That's why the Bible says that what God has put together, no man shall put asunder. And I believe that people are very confused. What God has put together, no one shall put asunder. What God has put together is what He created on the 6th day. It's not what you decided to get married to. Sorry, let me rephrase my words, because this sounds is not appropriately respectful. What God has put together is not the marriage that you put together in front of the mayor or in front of the priest or the pastor. No. What God has put together is those two souls, male and female in his image. The woman that is the bone of his bone and the flesh of his flesh. That's why when you find that wife, you become one flesh, because before you were separated, now you are back together. And that one flesh is supposed to produce a mighty divine assignment, not only in what the woman helps you accomplish, because until you find that woman, you will not, it's not a question, it's not if, it's not whatever, you will not. Okay, so a lot of people come on earth and they don't fulfill divine destiny because they are simply paired with the wrong person. Yes, you can have intimacy. Yes, you can accomplish big things together. Yes, you can even feel that you're making progress. You've done a lot, you've done this, you've done that. But at some point you will get stuck. Because that divine assignment, if you're someone who loves God, you will know inside of you that something is missing. You will know that there is more to achieve, and you will need that person, usually a woman, that wife who is designed to be your helper, designed to be your helpmate, designed to be the bone of your bones, designed to be the flesh of your flesh to accomplish that. And most of the time, there is a mighty seed coming out of that union. Okay? Well, this is just based on, what I read, what I see, and, what I understand. There are 4 different types of marriage possibilities. 2 that are humanly orchestrated. Even if you are in an equally orchestrated human marriage, meaning you are a power couple, you are achieving a lot, you're doing this, you're doing that, at some point in your life, there's going to be boredom. There's going to be less sexual attraction. There's going to be adultery. There's going to be loss of attraction, because maybe that woman was not the one God had prepared for you. Okay? Now, the ones you have to absolutely avoid are the spiritually manipulated ones from the kingdom of darkness. They are always for destruction. Always for destruction. And the one we should thrive to make happen in our lifetime are the ones that are divinely orchestrated. And most of the time, is the man who will see that wife. He will recognize her. He will lose his mind. Love will come out. Even if he's a logical person, even if he's a high achiever, that love will bring him to his knees, because the soul is speaking. Because there is a soul recognition. And God is behind it, because you have to remember, God is love. Okay? Well, thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry this was too long. But that's what I had to say. And I see you next time. Bye.